finally time to unveil the new and updated index and data for this year. And the data I'm about to present was sampled during 2022 to get the full year. And as you know, we catch cities on their individual prime day. So some prime in January, some are prime in June, July, and some even in December. So we need a full year. And now it's time to get going with that. Let's go. Looking at the overview here, this year we have grown the index with 9% into 279 cities. That's 24 more than last year. I think that's amazing that so many cities are joining the index. As I mentioned before, 640 million people live in the areas that we observe. And that area is roughly 90,000 square kilometers this year. We've added another country as well this year. So from 60 to 61. That's really great. And just to mention some of these new cities that we really welcome. We welcome all of you. But just to mention a few, we have the city of Riyadh joining. Jönköping in Sweden, where we are right now. Really great to have you on board. Frederiksberg in Denmark, just in the center of Copenhagen. And also Edmonton in Canada. Welcome. It's great to have you here. And let's now dive into the data for this year. And we have our classic questions. How green are cities? Do they get greener? We will also look at the change development from last year. And then go through the city data and achievements per group of cities. And finally, looking at nature positive cities. I think that's a really cool thing. But coming back to that, let's go. Well, our classic question, how green are cities really? And this year, 43%. And last year, remember, we had 45%. So, of course, as we grow with new cities, we change the mix. So the current benchmark is 43%. But more relevant, of course, is to look at the different regions in here. And you can see here for Europe, a decline actually from 51% last year to 46% this year. So that's one of the more significant reductions here. But that's also more cities joining in Europe. North America, they stay on 37%. And Latin America and Africa grows with 1%. So there is some movement in here, both on the plus side and the minus side. But this is how green cities are. Over to the next question. Are cities getting greener? And I think this is one of the more interesting parts of this. And yeah, what's the answer? This year I can proudly say yes. So that's really great, actually. I think it's the first time ever we see this positive trend. It's a small but distinct growth on average. And between 21 and 22, we could see this growth of 0.009%. That's a very small percentage, but it actually equals 8.1 million square meters or more green space in the cities covered. So I think that's really, really cool. Small percentage, but quite large area. And this is then, for the first time, we can see this positive trend here. So it's not a great change since last year, but it tips over to the positive side. And that makes me so happy. It's really cool. Overall, we can also see a really vital and healthy green space in most cities. A small decline since last year. It was 0.7 back then, but it's overall very healthy. So happy message on the growth. If we dive a bit more into the change here, all cities, even if they grow greener or not, they have both sides. So in our analysis, we can actually determine the sum of positive change and the sum of negative change. So looking at the total, we have a pretty good balance, but leaning over to the positive side. Going through the different regions, we can see that all regions except for Central East Asia equals China and Europe has a positive net, which is really, really great. Green space is growing in Africa, in East, Southeast Asia and Oceania, in Latin America, North America, and South and West Asia. So that's really cool. They are on the positive side. So that's great. Yes, so let's go through some of the more detailed data in the different categories of cities. And on the HUGSI website, you can filter cities in many different ways, finding a relevant combination for you. And first out is the megacities. And a megacity, that's a city with the population over 10 million people. And in HUGSI, we're monitoring 18 of them. So that's 6.5% of all cities in the index. And our definition or our cohort of megacities has an average population of 15 million. So there are some really, really big cities in here like Tokyo and others. And looking at the KPIs for the megacities, they have, of course, a special setup when it comes to the density of people and the pure amount of people and size of cities. But looking at this, I think still is really amazing. 35% of the city is urban green. So that's really cool how they can actually balance the needs of a mega city and the green ambition. Also the tree cover, 25%, that's really good. Strong number for being such big cities. Looking at the urban green per capita, that's of course a challenge. 40 square meters, that's well above the sort of recommendations or the lowest recommendations from WHO of 9 square meters. But it's of course far less than many of the other cities, but still well achieved by the megacities. 27% distribution of urban green space, not great, but still coming back to the hardship of being a mega city with all the competition of land use. Great KPIs. Looking into the achievement from the different cities, we can see the green model city of the mega cities is Dhaka in Bangladesh. And yeah, so they come back on many of the different scores in here. So green model city is Dhaka. Great job. European capitals, next up. And we have our largest group of cities from Europe, and there's obviously a lot of capitals there. So an interesting filter would be to look at just European capitals. So let's look into that group, 23 cities, and the size is around 2.4 million people on average. Looking here, we can see the, higher percent of urban green in this cohort. Smaller cities, easier to be green. Tree cover is also more. Green per capita, 88 square meters. Really great. And a pretty decent distribution. And here I know there's a lot of cities hoping to be high up on this list. And let's look into that. You can see Vilnius almost all over the board. Great, Vilnius. Vilnius is also the green capital in Europe this year, taking over from Tallinn last year. So I think this plays well into their celebration there. We can also see Rome here on very high percentage of grass cover, 26%. Madrid on very high vitality, 0.88. That's really great, from -1 to +1, remember. So that's the capitals in Europe for you. And remember last year we introduced a new type of group of cities looking into different climate zones. So let's have a look at the cities from that perspective. starting off with the north temperature zone. This is the largest group of climate zones. 84% of all cities is part of this. And it's cities of all sizes in here. Looking at the KPIs here for this group, you can see very high percentage of green space, percentage 44%. So that's one above the global average. So this is here. This is where you find the really green cities. Good health, 0.68, a bit lower than the global average. An impressively high number of green per capita here, 214 square meters. That's a big picnic blanket for people in these cities. And the tree cover percentage, 26%. Yeah, pretty decent. Looking into the cities here, Austin, Texas in the US. That's the green model city of the north temperature zone, scoring highest on the combined index of the KPIs. Otherwise, we could see that Zeist in the Netherlands is actually beating Charlotte, being one of the cities with very high tree canopy. They are beating them with 60%. And looking back at the average here of 26, 60%. That's crazy. It's very high. Very good. Going into the torrid zone, a smaller cohort of cities here, but high in population. 12% of the cities are here. And you can see also that they have challenge on the KPIs. 31% green percentage. A bit lower on the health as well. And lower as well on green per capita and tree percentage. But they have their conditions just around the equator. So looking here, we have a very green city, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, as the green model city. And then a mix of cities in the other areas of the torrid zone with strong achievements. So that's really cool. And going down south then to the south temperature zone. And this is a very small group, only 11 cities on the south part of the globe. Going through their KPIs here, we can see that they're really high on the vitality here. So very vibrant cities when it comes to the health of vegetation. Also fairly high on the green per capita and green percentage. Tree cover, also really, really good. Looking into the cities here, we have Durban and South Africa all over the board here. Durban being one of the recognized cities throughout the years in HUGSI. They are also the green model city of the south temperature zone. So well done. So looking into the climate zones, that's one way of structuring the cities more into the natural preconditions of climate and the different greening zones that we have. Another defining factor we've found is the population density of cities. Because with different density of population, you have different competition of land use. So it's generally harder to be green the more people that lives there. That's natural. So let's browse through these categories, starting at the low population density. That's a group of cities between 500 to 1,500 people per square kilometer. So that's how it's defined. And looking here, we see here a very high percentage of urban green space, as expected. Fairly high number of tree cover, but not super high. A very high number on the green per capita, of course. Almost 500 square meters, that's huge. And a very high number of distribution. Also makes sense where you have lower population density. In here, we have the city of Charlotte really standing out. Charlotte, North Carolina, USA. And Charlotte is one of the, looking at the average population of this cohort is 33,000. Charlotte is a city, according to at least the area we analyze, of around 700,000 inhabitants. So they score really high, being a big city with fairly low density of population. Very green city. And stepping into the next category here, the medium population density cities. So these would be cities with a population density between 1,500 and 3,000 people per square kilometer. And looking here, we still have a very high percentage of urban green, a very good tree canopy cover, a decent per capita as well. Of course, well below the medium or low population density cities, but still very good. Distribution we can see starting to shrink here, but still on a high number. Looking at the cities here then, Austin, Texas in the US again. We had them before on the climate zone. Now we have them on the medium population density as the green model city with the combined high score on the index. And we can mention also Ingolstadt here on the very high grass canopy cover. So that's interesting. Moving now into the high population density cities. And here we are looking at cities between 3,000 and 5,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. So boosting up the average population now to 1.6 million. So it's 64 cities in this group. And we still can see a very high percentage of green space, high percentage of tree canopy cover. We can see that the distribution goes down and the per capita green, it's still very high, 112, but significantly lower than the other groups. Looking at the list of cities, again, Durban leading here. We had them before on the climate zone as well. Interesting here is Helsinki with a very high tree cover canopy percentage. So that's really cool. 47% really stands out. And then finally looking into the very high population density cities. And that's the really big cities. You can see a total population of 502 million. Remembering that the total amount was 640, so a vast majority of people live here. So very high population means that it's over 5,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. And looking at their numbers, referring back to the megacities, structure-wise, these are pretty close to them, but 76 cities instead of the 18. So comparing to the megacities are actually achieving better outcome than looking at the total population of large and densely populated cities. So we can see 31% green space. Tree canopy cover, still, I would say, an impressive 22%. But the distribution and green per capita is suffering, of course. That's a challenge. But still relevant to see what are the cities, high achievers in this group. Dhaka in Bangladesh, that was also the green model city of the megacities. But we can see Johannesburg in here, Rome, Beijing, and so on. So these are the high achievers among the very high population density cities. So that sort of concludes that part where we're looking into the data on the different categories. And now it's time for a very much of a favorite on my end, looking at the nature positive cities. So that means relating to the change we have detected from 21 to 22, looking at what has been negative change and impacted negatively the green of the city, and where can we see growth and a positive development on the green space. The net is what we're looking at, the net change. So if you have a positive net, then you're a nature positive city. And for many cities, that's a high ambition goal. Perhaps it could be also pretty good to be just neutral. Cities need to develop. They need to build housing and roads and commercial buildings. But it comes down to the competition of land use. And some cities have actually managed to balance that or even have a positive outcome. And that's really great. And this year we have the highest number of nature positive cities ever. 67 cities of the 279 are positive and 4 are neutral. Of course, the rest, the majority is negative, but it's showing a very strong development on the positive side. And that's, of course, really great. And we just made a compilation here of the 10 cities with highest change percentage, looking at the absolute change we have in square meters related to the size of the city. So you can see a kind of widespread here, cities from the Netherlands, Chile, Senegal, Argentina, China, India, and Germany. But the list is bigger in total. And look into that on the HUGSI website. Yes, that wraps up the data and insights part of today's presentation.